Hi class, in this video we're going to be talking about outliers. An outlier is a value that is either much smaller or much larger than the other data values. A data set may have one or more outliers or no outliers. So let's go over an example. In this example, I have 5 students taking a science test. Their results are below. One student scored 38%, another scored 45%, one scored 19%, one scored 42%, and then one particular student scored 96%. So the student that scored 96%, because his score is much higher than the rest of the other students, he would be considered an outlier. So he scored really well on his science test. However, the other 4 students, they didn't score so well. And in fact, if pass or fail was 50%, they would have failed the science test. So I'm going to say the one student, 96, is an outlier. And here's a graph of their results. So as you can see, the first student, 38%, then 45%, 19%, 42%, then finally 96%. So if I were to take the mean average of all 5 students, meaning I add all 5 data points together, then divide it by my total number of data points, which is 5, I would get a mean of 48. And looking at the mean's supposed to tell me the average, right? So that means the class average here is 48%. It's getting dragged up by the one student who scored 96. And this happens less as you get more and more students, because when you have a bigger sample size, the outliers affect your data way less. But because there's only 5 students here, this outlier really affects the data. And now it looks like the class as a collective scored 48, but it's not really a fair way of stating that, because technically speaking, 4 students didn't even get above 48%. And only one student got above 90. One student got above 48%. They got 96%. They're just dragging up the class average. So another way you can do this is if you remove the outlier. So if I simply just calculate the mean, meaning I just added 38 plus 45 plus 19 plus 42 together, and then divide it by my total number of data points, so I divide the answer by 4, I would instead get a mean average of 36, which doesn't include the outlier. So that means now this is a much more fair representation of what the other 4 students got. So it's up to you whether or not you want to remove the outlier or keep the outlier in there, because sometimes it's appropriate and sometimes it's not appropriate to take out the outlier. And that's essentially what an outlier is. It can either be a very large value that is different than the data points, or it can be a very small value that is different than the data points.